I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear, and I'll permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Bene Gesserit mantra. Key story components for a great homebrew campaign. Hello and welcome to Game Theory. My name is Ramji and I am the Dungeon Master and host of a group called The Fourth Culture. We play Dungeons & Dragons on the internet as well as Vampire the Masquerade on the internet on t4c.online or Twitch or YouTube, which is probably where you're watching me right now. So this is a video that's part of a series that I'm doing, and we'll go into the details about that in a second, but really this one is focusing on key story components for a great homebrew campaign and how, to my imagination, there's a couple of things for us to learn from the great novelists, especially the great sci-fi novelists. So, to kick us off though, I want to talk about what are the key components of a great homebrew campaign. What are the real elemental things you need, especially when you talk to players and other folks. And I've talked to a bunch of players, I've talked to people on Clubhouse, I've talked to our players, I've talked to some amazing folks, part of our Discord community, as well as, just in general folks who are far more knowledgeable than I am about the art of dungeon mastering and playing in tabletop games, which is what we're really here to talk about, right? So homebrew campaigns, for those of you who aren't familiar with the idea, is the idea where you make up the story, the world, a lot of the components and the content of the world rather than using pre-published adventure materials. So, for example, the kind of materials that are Storm King's Thunder or Curse of Strahd or things published by Wizards of the Coast, or modules that are written by somebody, play-tested, and then published on places like the DM's Guild or itch.io. And so rather than do that, homebrewing, which is something that I like to do a great deal of, is where you look at something you would like to involve in your story, and then you figure out how to bring it in. You create that part of the world yourself. Often you create the whole world, the cultures that are within it, the way that they react, the plots, the subplots. But one thing I've learned, probably the hard way, is that there are things that you need to have to make a great homebrew campaign. What makes a great homebrew campaign? Well, firstly, you need a reason to adventure. You need a harsh and ideally a hostile ecosystem of some sort. It could be the deserts of Athas. It could be the political climate of being a oppressed group that are fighting off an invasion. You need complex factions that are competing, ideally for a rare and much prized commodity, something that you are able to influence. So gold is an obvious one, but it could be diamonds, it could be mana, it could be some other sort of thing. But really there has to be something of value that gets exchanged between these complex factions in order that there is a reason to have the next thing that I think all good campaigns should have, which is some deadly politics and a bit of intrigue. Because when you start mixing very human motives for acquisition of this rare commodity in order to be able to achieve some goals, you have these different sort of complex factions that are competing, plus you have somewhere that is inherently a difficult place to survive, then all of a sudden you've got the preconditions of a reason to adventure. Now, then we say, what else do you need? Well, powerful, clever adversaries. There's no point just fighting against big hulking brutes with bags of hit points. You want clever adversaries that have a high level of intelligence and wisdom, that are able to think ahead of your party, get ahead of your players, and be put in a situation of not always being on the back foot reacting to players, but are proactively creating trouble for your players in a very believable way. While we're talking about believability, or what Matt Colville, who's an amazing YouTuber, if you don't know him, I'll try and put something down in, as he would refer to it, the doobly-doo below, there must be consequences to choices. There must be a verisimilitude, as it were, of the fact that when you do something, you stick a sword in someone's body, they have a sword stuck in them, and in most cases are probably going to die. Now, that is a consequence to a choice, because once you've made the choice to stick a sword in someone, one, the consequence is they're going to die. Two, the second order consequence is someone's probably going to care that you've killed somebody. And then the third order consequence of that is when they come around and start a fight with your lot. And so consequences to choices are important, because then your choices have meaning. Players, all of us, are frustrated the most when the choices we make don't matter. That's where people talk about railroading. They're not really talking about the fact that, hey, here's a narrow story channel. It's that if I make a choice here, it doesn't seem to matter what choice I make. It doesn't matter what door I go through, I run into the same NPC in the same manner. Now, this then leads to, a bit more, we can talk about that later, and how do you then kind of shape the campaign to go in a particular direction. But right now we're talking about those core preconditions, those things that make a great homebrew. Potential allies to recruit, being able to look at the world and not just see bags of XP walking around, and instead see things that you can influence in order to make the world different. Again, consequences to choices. If you spend time influencing the bishop of the largest, most powerful church of fire in your country, then you will potentially recruit the fire church and the fire clerics as allies in your war against the dark woodsman. I mean, who knows? It doesn't matter. But the point is that if you put the effort in, you should have consequences that come out to it. It shouldn't just be minimal. The next time you meet somebody from the church, they should refer to you as fire bearer or, the incendiary one or something like that. There should be status that comes with these things. So all of that stuff comes back to the idea of there must be potential allies to recruit, as well as clever, powerful adversaries and complex groups of people with different agendas. And ultimately, I would say, need a compelling backstory and plot. This is nowhere near as important as people think. As in, if you are a DM listening right now, and you are thinking to yourself, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to spend the next 3 months writing pages upon pages upon pages of backstory and plot documents. Well, the advice I always give to people is you're not doing that for your players, you're doing it for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. You should do things for yourselves. You should sleep, you should drink water, you should write pages of backstory, whatever makes you happy and whole. But don't think for a moment that's what's going to make your homebrew campaign compelling and interesting to your players. It may make it compelling and interesting to you. What you really want to do is to be able to have enough of a backstory in order to be able to have a reason to adventure. And I think that is really what it boils down to. If your players and the band of characters that they have brought into being have co-created that backstory with you, have co-built out this idea of why they're there, then they will find that reason themselves. And often the way I like to do this is actually make the first act, the first few levels of the campaign, the crafting of that collective backstory together. You bring the players in on the plot. You basically say, look, this is roughly where we're going to go, and this is roughly where the actual game is going to kick off. So it allows you to fudge over a few things. You don't have to make everything, full RP, full intensity all the time. You just do the bits that are fun, as it were. But then you can kind of move it to the point where once you kick off the dynamic, everybody's bought in and they've got a reason to adventure and they've got an investment in the backstory. I'll talk about that more another day, especially we can talk about the thing we did when we first kicked off the fourth culture, which is we all played a game called Microscope, and I will dig that video out one day and sort of share it around. I'm not sure how great a quality it is, but it's certainly an educational thing that I think is a good bit of fun for everybody to try out. The final point I would say is kind of fundamental to a long-term homebrew campaign is to have a world to explore and grow in. And these are two slightly different things. The first is the idea of being able to wander around the world and see different things, having maps, having routes, understanding the way that people get from place A to place B and what the perception of place B is in place A. What I mean by that is if you are we're in Singapore, and if you're in Singapore and you are thinking about traveling to Mars, for example, let's say you could, then how would I get there? Question number one. Question number two is, what is the opinion of the people in Singapore about Mars? Is it that it's red and dusty and doesn't have any water and it's got a handprint, just waiting for Arnold Schwarzenegger to arrive to reactivate the ecological cycle, the same as the plot of Total Recall? Or is it not that? I mean, whatever it is, you need to know it so that as people wander through your world, they're able to explore it through the eyes of the people that are there. That's what we do when we travel a great deal. Yes, we see things, but also we explore ourselves and we explore the world through the experiences of other people and their cultures. And so that brings me to the next point, which is as your player characters travel through your world and experience things, they will grow and progress as characters. They will become stronger, they will have picked up scars, they will be frustrated about some things, and their very nature will have changed from the level 0 sort of greenhorns that they once were. And so, to that point, it's very important that actually your world has got the ability that as they grow, they continue to be challenged and find things that are both fascinating but also difficult in order for them to be able to interact with the world without it just being, cool, I am a 18th level paladin and I can go where I like. MMOs and computer games do this very well. You are very, very clearly able to know that if you go into this zone over here, it's a newbie zone for levels 0 to 10. If you go into that zone over there, it's a 75 plus zone, so good fucking luck. And I think that's one of the things that's harder to do with verisimilitude in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, but you still can do it. You can signpost it. You can basically have the frontier be where a lot of the adventurers go to get stronger because they fight some of the big beasts of the hostile environment there. And the backwater, the sort of like safe parts, the cities, everything else, they're much lower level. And you can still make that believable where you can have high level guards that are posted around. But really the job of the high level adventurers is to be on the frontier. And so you move from the safe city to the frontier as you grow, exploring the world as you go. Let's talk about a hypothetical homebrew campaign. Emperor BIGBAD gives House Noble a remote HARSHPLACE, replacing their rival House Antagonist as rulers of this HARSHPLACE. Now, HARSHPLACE is the only source of the magic dust which is required by some powerful guilds to do some important stuff. House Noble must send fortnightly magic dust shipments back to the Empire. The magic dust must move is a phrase that they often use in the Empire. And HARSHPLACE itself suffers quite badly ecologically, as it's the only source of magic dust in the known world, which also has a bit of a problem because there's this strange mystical relationship with some big ass monsters that inhabit HARSHPLACE. And so there's the HARSHPLACE, the fact that it's harsh is the reason why you get the magic dust, the fact that these big ass monsters exist is the reason you get the magic dust. So as the people who are responsible for extracting the magic dust from HARSHPLACE, you can't just kill the big ass monsters and you can't just make HARSHPLACE less harsh. There's this sort of required hostile environment to create the preconditions for this important substance. Now, there is a grumpy tribe. The grumpy tribe has been oppressed by House Antagonist, the previous stewards of HARSHPLACE, and the grumpy tribe considers the magic dust itself to be a sacrament, a religiously important thing which they often consume as part of religious exercises or experiences. And so it's a sacrament of their religion, and they venerate the big ass monster as an avatar of their god. And so if you go around killing big ass monster, you're going to piss off grumpy tribe. Grumpy tribe are the tribe that have learned to survive in this hostile place, in fact arguably learned to prosper, although they're frustrated that they're not able to make it less hostile, because when they do, they run into the Empire, who turns around and goes, no, I need magic dust. And so it creates a tension, a central tension of this particular hostile environment. So additionally, the faith, the religious context of the grumpy tribe was seeded centuries ago by a powerful wizard order who are selectively breeding a master race and are going out there trying to manipulate the various groups in the sort of the multiverse in order to achieve their ends. No one really understands their ends, and they don't go out bragging about it to most people, but that's really the thing. Anyway, after reaching HARSHPLACE, House Noble discover that House Antagonist have been pretty bad leaders. They killed a bunch of people, they've extracted this horrible magical dust that's sort of like, you know, being made on the backs of the grumpy tribe, and they've done it without really a care for life, livelihood, or ecology. Not only that, but House Antagonist has sabotaged the important magitech stuff that's used to acquire the magic dust. So, you know, however the magic dust is extracted, those tools have already been buggered up as the thing that you're doing when you show up as House Noble-Fool, well, guess what? I'm sorry, Noble-Fool, but that stuff's not working very reliably. And haven't you got a quota to meet in 2 weeks' time? House Antagonists have further left traps, assassins and bombs to hinder House Noble-Fool's ability to deliver the magic dust export quota, and everyone's getting pretty stressed about it. House Antagonists also, bit sneaky, have begun to conspire with Emperor BIGBAD to attack House Noble-Fool and destroy them. And this is ultimately because they want to regain control of magic dust because they've made a lot of money from it and they don't like the fact they're about to lose that. And obviously, as a result, the HARSHPLACE. So that's what House Antagonist wants. But also the BIGBAD has been very frustrated that House Noble-Fool have been getting a lot of respect. They're noble at the end of the day. They're powerful and they're becoming influential now. And the BIGBAD's feeling a little threatened. And well, what do BIGBADs do when they're threatened? Well, they conspire. They do bad things. So, an unfortunate Noble-Fool advisor is blackmailed by sort of the leader of the antagonists, of House Antagonist, and commits significant treachery, which basically allows antagonist soldiers and big, bad, scary elites to catch House Noble-Fool unaware and unprepared in an overwhelming sneak attack. The traitor captures the Noble-Fool leader, and antagonist soldiers capture the leader's family and subjects the rest, pretty much everybody else in the compound, to a kill them all kind of policy. So basically at this point, your choices are, you've got some key folks, the leaders and the leader's family who've been swept away, and everybody else is on the run from powerful death squads. Those few loyal Noble-Fool who survive the attack escape into the HARSHPLACE, the hostile ecology and environment, in order to shelter with the grumpy tribe. So this is my thesis. This is the story. This is a great little homebrew campaign. This is a wonderful idea. Look how marvelous it is. You've got the Noble-Fools, you've got the HARSHPLACE, you've got the grumpy tribe, you've got the resource that you want to get, the magic dust, you've got different groups of people that have got competing reasons to be involved. You've got the basis of a bit of a campaign here. Also, some of you, especially those of you who've been looking at the screen a bit more closely, like up there or, over there, might have also recognized this as the plot of Frank Herbert's Dune, or at least the beginning plot, the preamble of it, if you will, or as some people will call it, the entire plot of the 2021 Denis Villeneuve movie Dune Part 1, but ultimately the game theory thesis. The game theory thesis is that the opening setup of Frank Herbert's Dune is the perfect template for a homebrew campaign, and this is why. House Noble-Fool, Emperor BIGBAD, House Antagonist, Antagonist Leader, HARSHPLACE, Grumpy Tribe. We know all these things. We just talked about them earlier in that setup. Well, they map really, really simply. Look, House Noble-Fool, well, that's House Atreides. Emperor BIGBAD, well, Shaddam IV, Carino, the known Emperor of the Universe. House Antagonist, the Harkonnen, the leader of the Harkonnen, the Baron Harkonnen. HARSHPLACE, Arrakis, or Dune as we know it. The Grumpy Tribe is the Fremen. We've got our magic dust, which is, if you look at it a bit more closely, well, that's the spice, melange. We've got the big-ass monster, the sandworms, the Shai-Hulud, the avatar of the god worshipped by the Grumpy Tribe Fremen. We have our wizard order that's been manipulating their way across the galaxy, the Bene Gesserit, the important Magitech, or spice harvesters, or various other things. You have powerful guilds, the Guild of Navigators, and they need the spice, otherwise all transportation shuts down. And then finally, you've got the big, bad, scary elites. And I say finally because there's so many other comparisons I can pull, but in this case, the big, bad, scary elites, who are the Emperor's Sardaukar, the shock troops that the Baron Harkonnen has to negotiate with Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam on behalf of the Emperor in order to borrow them as part of the attack they make on the Atreides in Dune or Arrakis. So, the game theory thesis. Well, let's talk about the party. The party should consist of retainers, advisors, and minor members of House Noble-Fool. You could be a man-at-arms, you could be you really wanted to, you could be Gurney Halleck, but more likely you're probably going to be somebody that works for Gurney Halleck. You're probably not going to be Duncan Idaho, you're going to be somebody that flies with Duncan Idaho, or one of the scouts that went with him on the early mission. You're probably going to be an advisor. You could be Thufir Hawat, the mentor, but you probably shouldn't be. You should probably be Thufir's sort of counterinsurgency specialist. I mean, these are all very high up senior members of the house, so you could just easily be the next level down. You would see the members of the house as the senior managers, the nobility, and you just take positions, various positions, whatever's interesting to players, whatever's interesting to the DM. You have a reason to be there because the Emperor has given House Nobleful the control of the HARSHPLACE. And so as loyal members of House Nobleful, for whatever reason you're going, so whether you're the cook, the butler, you could be a junior doctor, you could be a security guard, you could be anything that's part of the broader context of House Nobleful, a teacher, a gardener, it doesn't matter. You have a reason to have gone to the HARSHPLACE in order to support House Nobleful's endeavor to mine the magic dust. And then you've got the opportunity as a DM and as players to go through a bit of a narrative journey, both across and explore out this world, explore out HARSHPLACE, but then as well as progress to get stronger. So if I was looking at it from a levels perspective, knowing that most D&D games stop about level 12, I'm like, well, no, let's not do that. Let's pump harder. Let's go up to level 15. Presuming I start at 0, if we wanted to start at 3, you would actually make this all the way to 18. But let's say that you start at level 0 and you are all the gardeners and the teachers and the junior guards and everything else. Well, you'll probably start the game, not in HARSHPLACE. You'll probably start the game very much like the movie Dune. You'll start there at Caladan or at wherever the nice place is, the nice place that belongs to the Nobleful. So let's call it the Nobleful place. So the Nobleful nice place is somewhere else, and you have to get there using the tools of the important guild, right? The Guild of Spacefarers, the Guild of Navigators, pardon me, has to take you from one planet in the Dune setting to another. Well, in the same way, the important guild will need to use this important stuff, the rare commodity, in order to be able to transport you from where the Nobleful nice place is to HARSHPLACE. And I think part of that is the level 0 characters run around doing fetching character missions, kind of getting everything together and then getting to HARSHPLACE, whereupon they then have the job of getting the magic dust moving, figuring out the sabotage stuff has happened, determining that there are these assassins, foiling a couple of plots, maybe chasing down some baddies. And then you get to the point, maybe around level 1 or 2, maybe level 3, where you kind of then kick off. You basically kick off the treachery. You have them deal with the cutscene. And yes, choices matter, but sometimes you're just overwhelmed. Level 15 Sardaukars show up and stomp their way through, at which point you're there going, well, cool, I watched Duncan Idaho fight, but we're like going to put up a bit of a defense and then GTFO. Right? And so you GTFO and you escape into the hostile environment of HARSHPLACE, and for the next 4 levels or so, you're surviving. You're getting from one place to the other, you're trying to make contact with an important grumpy tribe, but you're also trying to avoid the agents of House Adversary, who are still looking to chase you down and see if there's any remaining House Noblefuls around. And so as a result of that, there's this game of cat and mouse in this incredibly harsh environment. But by the time you get to sort of level 6 or 7, maybe you've begun to make allies with an important grumpy tribe and you've performed a bunch of missions for them to prove yourself. Maybe there's a rather like in Dune, the premise is, well, you need to prove that you're Fremen enough. Well, in the same way, maybe you need to prove that you're grumpy enough to be a member of the grumpy tribe. And that's going to be true for all the players. Maybe not all of them want to. Maybe some want to retain their imperial roots. But the point is they're not able to just walk up to a spaceport and get on a highliner route or walk up to a teleportation circle or whatever your guild does, because the adversaries are there ready to fuck them up. The antagonist, House Antagonist, is there ready to mess up their day. And so as a result of that, you then look at the fact that, well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to get stronger. We're going to have to build alliances. We're going to have to find allies and maybe do some politics and some horse trading. Maybe we can sort of make some relationships with the wizards that are the ones that are involving themselves in this sort of mystical breeding program. Maybe we can sort of like get some feelers out through smugglers in order to be able to talk with the guild themselves to be able to discuss, well, you know, there are other ways of you getting the magic dust you need rather than having to go through the front door. Yeah, would you support us? Maybe there's an entire range of things that can be done, but about the time you get to 10th level is around the time that you strike back. You attack, you destroy, or attempt to anyway, House Antagonist's control of HARSHPLACE, and you build up to it. You build yourself an army. You get together with the various different grumpy tribes and you create a group that are willing to fight together in order to remove the antagonist's control of HARSHPLACE. Why would they do that? Well, it's quite possible that the antagonists have performed some inciting events. Perhaps they've cracked down. They've destroyed a few grumpy tribes. They have, you know, begun to be a bit more parsimonious with their bribes or their payoffs in order to be able to pay back Emperor Bad Person's, you know, loan of the, you know, the Sardaukar. And you can see I'm quite happily interchanging these terms because, well, you know, it's a template. That's the nice thing about this movie or this book and the way that it's set up. Finally, by the time you've got to about level sort of 15 or so, you've kicked House Antagonist's ass. You've maybe, you know, had a couple of setbacks along the way, but oh boy, are you ready right now? You've got a whole bunch of allies and you now control the magic dust. And so whether or not you were able to sweet talk them, now the guild has got to listen to you. And as well as the guild listening to you, maybe you've discovered a couple of secrets about how the magic dust works. Either you can now replicate it, or more importantly, you can destroy it. And you can destroy the means of production. And if that means you can destroy it, you can control it, and therefore people will be scared of you. And so you've exerted power. And I think we'll talk about a few of these things in a minute, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, you take the fight to the Empire. Emperor BIGBAD, the antagonist leader, maybe you discover the fate of Noblefood leader, maybe they're alive, maybe they're dead like Duke Leto, maybe they had a kind of like a strange half-heroic death, maybe you discover where the heirs are, the family that went missing, and you take your vengeance for the fall of House Nobleful. Maybe you knock over the Empire and you take it over, or you keep it propped up and you replace the lead, but you control the real power. That is a world of political intrigue that's available to you and the players. And so, really, when it comes down to what I'm talking about, at the core of this, there are a few concepts I want to bring up. Scarcity is very, very important. If everything's available easily, then people aren't going to want to do anything because it's just there. When things are scarce and unable to be found, then people will do ridiculous things for them. Power. Power is really important, as you can all imagine. I don't mean the electricity coming out your walls, though that's a type of power all by itself. That's probably why it's used the word. But what I mean is the ability to have your way, make other people choose to do the things that benefit you, that you want them to do, rather than you do the things that other people want you to do for them. How does power work? What are you supposed to do about it? How do you get it? All of these things are well and truly out of the scope of our conversation. But what I will talk about is the nature of power is that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. People have to have power imposed on them, and people have to allow themselves to be subject to that power. Otherwise, you end up in a state of rebellion, right? And so there is an interesting and meaningful discussion about power within the story of Dune itself, and there should be an interesting discussion about the nature of power within your homebrew campaign. Choice. Choices matter. And this is especially important in the context of the next thing, which I'm going to mention as well, which is fate. And this is something they do quite well in Dune. There is an obvious statement made often and early that Paul is the Muad'Dib, the Kwisatz Haderach, the final sort of attempt to make the Ubermensch, the super person that is what humanity all should be, right? Now, when you look at the Fremen beliefs. The Fremen believe that he's the Lisan al-Gaib. He is the voice from the outer world, that he is the Messiah that has been prophesied to come. All of these things smack of fate. But then when you start peeling off the top, what you actually find is it's the result of a series of choices made by the Bene Gesserit. Basically, your wizards have manipulated the less intelligent, less capable individuals of the worlds, and, you know, of the many worlds in the case of Dune, to believe these things. This is a mass gaslight performed by wizards. This is what wizards should be doing with their intelligence 18. Casting fireballs is for losers by comparison to controlling the destiny of billions, which is really what they're doing. And so the contrast between fate and choice, and how one person may see something as fate and prophecy, whilst another just sees it as a predetermined series of choices, they're two sides of the same coin, and by heavens, they do a good job of it in Dune. And I recommend you introduce a concept like this into your game. Make the player's actions part of fate. Make them things that were predefined or thought about, and as they choose this, they'll be puzzled because I, the human being, chose that for my character. How is that possible that that's something that's written in this scripture? Now, initially, they'll probably go, yeah, the DM's making it up, but after a while, you'll weave it into the story narrative, and they will become more and more involved in the prophecy plot. So, that is where I want to leave this hypothesis. So really, what have I been saying? What is the whole premise? What's the point, Ramji? Well, I'm saying that the Frank Herbert book, Dune, one cracking book, cracking movie, 1984, really a pretty decent 2021 movie, a whole bunch of good TV series, everything else, but more than all of that, more than anything else, it is a hell of a template setup for your D&D homebrew campaign. So what do you do to get it going? Well, just think of Dune.